From killer dolls to demons in the woods, and a genius with a taste for Chianti, so much horror has happened in so little time. So which iconic series are worth catching up on? In his 1981 novel Red Dragon, author Thomas Harris introduced the world to Dr. Hannibal Lecter. The 1986 mystery thriller Manhunter was the first film adaptation of Harris's book, featuring Brian Cox as the creepy expert of psychiatry. But it generated little public interest. It wasn't until 1991's The Silence of the Lambs, based on Harris's sequel novel, raked in $130 million at the domestic box office, that Hannibal Lecter became a household name. Anthony Hopkins gave the character chilling new life, earning an Oscar for the role.
A census taker once tried to test me. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Hannibal picked up a decade after The Silence of the Lambs, with Julianne Moore taking over the role of Clarice Starling. It was a solid effort, but the film series' two prequels, Red Dragon and Hannibal Rising, stand at opposite ends of the quality spectrum. The former film more faithfully adapted Thomas's 1981 book, but the latter failed to achieve anything remotely creative or interesting. Years later, Hannibal would make the jump to television, with the show starring Mads Mikkelsen, which course-corrected the franchise and offered up 3 seasons of delectable frights. Thanks to the movies and the show, Dr. Lecter became an iconic character, known for his remarkable intelligence and taste for human flesh. While not every appearance of his has been outstanding, The Silence of the Lambs remains one of the most impressive and frightening horror films of all time. When The First Saw debuted in 2004, it reached levels of brutality rarely seen from American films at the time. Directed by James Wan and written by Leigh Whannell, it broke new ground for horror with its terrifying traps and mind-blowing twist. The film series may get more convoluted as it continues, but the release of each Saw sequel became an almost yearly ritual for fans. Besides the allure of the jigsaw killer John Kramer, audiences flocked to the theaters to see the darkly creative torture sequences. Whether depicting a pit of needles, a demented merry-go-round, or a finger trap from hell, the set pieces of Saw set it apart from other extremist films. The blood, brain matter, and dismembered body parts are just as important as whatever's making them fly all over the place. Unfortunately, an abundance of non-linear storytelling has muddled the Saw timeline quite a bit. From flashbacks shoehorned into the story to sequels that leave sequences of events in question, the Saw franchise is a puzzling watch if you're searching for consistency. But it's always a gory good time if that's what you're into. And it's still chugging along with its 2023 installment, Saw X.
Live or die. Make your choice.
With his 1974 original film, Tobe Hooper commented on the horrors of the era, like the Vietnam War, and their lingering effects on the boomer generation. 12 years later, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre traded its socio-political grittiness for outlandish camp, with the much goofier Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2. The franchise never adhered to a single family dynamic, swapping out relatives like people change their socks. When the series fully celebrated the wacky, as an unhinged Matthew McConaughey did in 1995's Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation, it succeeded in deconstructing its own mythology. For better or worse, it always made bold moves, and it was never afraid to let Leatherface evolve. With the 2022 requel, also called The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the franchise moved to provide commentary on gentrification, as millennials who seek to turn a ghost town into a trendy hotspot find themselves on the wrong end of the chainsaw. Throughout its 9 films, the series never takes itself too seriously. And even though the franchise is a bit of a mess, its films are perfect for midnight viewings. Wes Craven found inspiration for A Nightmare on Elm Street after reading a tragic story about a young teen with recurring nightmares who died in his sleep. A real-life terror begat one of the most gruesome mass murderers in horror, Freddy Krueger. With his signature razor glove, Freddy haunted the dreams of Nancy Thompson and her friends in the 1984 classic. While the slasher age was on its way out, the wisecracking villain injected the genre with an adrenaline boost. 4 sequels dropped throughout the 80s, as well as the short-lived TV series Freddy's Nightmares. Freddy's reign of terror first came to an end with Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare in 1991. 3 years later, Craven returned to the franchise for New Nightmare, a meta-slasher that saw Heather Langenkamp and Robert Englund play fictionalized versions of themselves. As teased at the end of Jason Goes to Hell: The Final Friday, Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees eventually went toe-to-toe in an epic battle during 2003's Freddy vs. Jason. The curtain seemed to finally close on the Freddy saga, until a remake landed in 2010. The franchise started off strong before it moved away from what made it so special. Freddy went from a menacing nightmare demon in the first 3 films to a paper-thin caricature of himself, mostly known for silly one-liners. If nothing else, this series is always good for a chuckle, intentional or not.
Welcome to prime time, bitch!
Halloween is full of twists, turns, reboots, and remakes, but it could never quite stay on course. John Carpenter's 1978 classic cemented many tropes we'd come to expect in a slasher, bringing fear into everyone's backyard. The simple formula of Halloween made the slasher easy to imitate and widely inspired the subgenre's boom in the 80s. Over the next 4+ decades, Halloween became one of the biggest box office draws in horror history. Studios churned out 12 sequels, including the David Gordon Green reboot trilogy that concluded in 2022 with Halloween Ends. Along the way, Michael Myers came under the control of a demonic cult, appeared on a reality TV show, and saw his backstory get a total white trash overhaul courtesy of Rob Zombie. Halloween 3 even abandoned Myers entirely, instead focusing on the sinister Silver Shamrock Company and their monstrous mask. A franchise that began as a monumental achievement, Halloween morphed into a trend-chasing slasher franchise with nothing interesting to say. Sadly, it left its most compelling aspects, such as the mystique surrounding its antagonist, on the cutting room floor. Still, Halloween remains a cultural phenomenon, and it continues to define terror for several generations of horror fans. In 2009, the axis of the horror world shifted with the release of Paranormal Activity. Not since 1999's The Blair Witch Project did a found-footage flick shock audiences in such an indescribable way. Fear found a new home with Katie and Mika, and it wasn't going to take any prisoners. Made on a shoestring budget, Paranormal Activity proved that haunted houses could still be terrifying, and that they didn't need to be filled with expensive effects. Through the power of suggestion, the film became a viral sensation that put the production company Blumhouse on the map. Much like Saw, sequels and a prequel were churned out almost yearly. Each offered strong scares, especially Paranormal Activity 3 and the marked ones, which had a way of really getting under the skin. What could or could not be lurking in the darkness was the series' greatest asset, as human imagination is the most frightening thing of all. Paranormal Activity lets fear run rampant, and all audiences can do is try not to look away. In space, no one can hear you scream, but the screams you'll probably make while watching Alien come out loud and clear. Ridley Scott's 1979 classic masterfully combined science fiction with horror by introducing the world to the terrifying xenomorph.
You still don't understand what you're dealing with, do you? Perfect organism.
While the xenomorph remains one of horror's most enduring icons, Alien and its sequels would be nothing without Ellen Ripley, the heroic protagonist portrayed by Sigourney Weaver. For the first 4 films in the franchise, she finds herself facing off against the extraterrestrial creatures time and time again. Ridley Scott was replaced with James Cameron for the first sequel, Aliens, which traded some of the scares for bombastic action set pieces. Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection dipped a bit back into the world of horror, but the story became mangled enough during these installments that many people lost interest. Since then, the Alien franchise has never quite regained its stride. Prometheus and Alien Covenant, while entertaining at times, introduced so many new ideas that they feel completely different, and the absence of Ellen Ripley doesn't help. There's also the Alien vs. Predator movies, but those aren't much more than cinematic novelties. Still, Alien is an incredibly popular franchise thanks to the stomach-churning nature of its first installment and the exciting action of its second. According to Victor Miller, Sean S. Cunningham sought to explicitly rip off Halloween with the creation of his own holiday-themed horror. Friday the 13th riffed on slasher conventions laid out by its predecessor, but it upped the body count and really let blood run. The original 1980 film, starring Betsy Palmer as the vengeful matriarch Pamela Voorhees, became a box office juggernaut and jump-started one of the biggest horror franchises in history. Jason Voorhees took over for his mother in Friday the 13th Part 2, and he stuck around as the film series dominated the 80s with 6 more sequels. No one could slow Jason down, until Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday, put him to rest for 8 long years. As with Halloween and A Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th got weirder as the franchise continued. Jason fought a young woman with telekinetic powers, took a boat to New York City, went to space, and eventually battled with Freddy Krueger. The franchise was nothing if not adventurous. Following a remake in 2009, the franchise went dormant due to ongoing legal battles between creators Cunningham and Miller. However, a prequel series titled Crystal Lake, helmed by Brian Fuller, promises to bring Jason Voorhees back from the dead again. The franchise's many shortcomings, from bizarre premises to contrived storylines, don't detract from its importance in slasher history. Psycho is a foundational horror staple, but as a franchise, it's somewhat underrated. A proto-slasher, Alfred Hitchcock's 1960 film took terror from caves and castles into the modern era. Fear didn't manifest through ghouls, goblins, or witches, but through a gentleman in a roadside motel. One iconic scene in the film scared audiences, and its star, Janet Leigh, away from taking showers and influenced countless other creepy works. It's hard to imagine a sequel living up to what the original did, but 1983's Psycho 2 served as a natural progression to the story. Years after the first film, Norman Bates' prison sentence is over, so he confronts his past and attempts a fresh start. Psycho 3 and Psycho 4: The Beginning failed to achieve the same creative achievement as the first two films. However, later films deepened Norman's character study. Where Psycho 3 regurgitated plot points from the original while dishing up some excellent kills, Psycho 4 took a glimpse into an aging serial killer's head. While calling into a radio show, Norman reveals insight into his childhood through flashbacks. Psycho as a whole, including the Bates Motel TV series, ended up being a worthwhile trip through a maniac's psychology. Anthony Perkins' lead performance is particularly effective. With suspenseful scares and brutal violence, this franchise leaves its peers in the rearview mirror.
We all go a little mad sometimes. Haven't you?
James Wan earned his place among the most masterful modern directors thanks to his agility and genre fluidity. That's why it's no wonder he's been crafting several of the best horror franchises in the past 2 decades, including Saw and The Conjuring. With The Conjuring, Wan created a haunted world ripped from real-life accounts of ghosts. It adapts the reported Perron family haunting, following the work of paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. The Conjuring doesn't stop with its main 3 films. Wan used the Warren characters and their cursed objects to spawn a cinematic universe, including 3 Annabelle-centric installments, The Nun and The Curse of La Llorona. Sure, the quality of these films dips here and there, but that's the case for most franchises on this list. Overall, there are far more home runs than strikeouts here. With a polished mainstream appeal, The Conjuring delivers exciting jump scares that always serve the story. If it weren't for the mediocre entries The Nun and The Curse of La Llorona, the series would likely rank even higher on our list. Final Destination retooled slasher conventions and upended modern horror. The killer isn't some unknown assailant in a mask running around with a knife, but rather death itself. There's all sorts of mundane objects we encounter in everyday life that could all of a sudden turn deadly, from escalators to tanning beds. And this series plays up those fears to the maximum. Whenever the main characters manage to cheat death after one sees a vision of the future, death always manages to come back and settle the score in painfully elaborate ways. Even at its weakest, which is undoubtedly 2009's The Final Destination, the series outpaces most of its contemporaries. Actors Devon Sawa, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, and Tony Todd have all contributed charming character performances, providing plenty of emotional arcs to anchor each installment's elaborate death sequences. Sure, the action may be over-the-top gruesome, but that's why it's been able to leave such an impression on today's horror fans. There's a reason why no one likes to drive behind a log truck anymore, after all.
In death, there are no accidents, no coincidences, no mishaps, and no escapes.
In 1968, George A. Romero forever changed the horror landscape with Night of the Living Dead. While zombie films were not a new concept, with movies featuring them dating back to 1932, it was Romero that popularized zombies as a modern premise. It established the massive zombie subgenre that we have today. Without it, we wouldn't have things like The Walking Dead or World War Z. What's even more important, however, is how the film spun an entire franchise. Across 5 sequels, Romero expanded his story of flesh-eating monsters. From 1978's Dawn of the Dead to 1985's Day of the Dead to 2007's Diary of the Dead, each entry stands on its own 2 feet in terms of story and execution. Between a shopping mall, an underground bunker, and a lavish mansion, Romero explored how different human beings would react to and possibly survive an outbreak. Surprisingly, the sequels more than live up to the original film, showing great attention to the creation of solid stories and characters. Zombie movies don't get much better than this. Sorry, Annabelle, but Chucky is the MVP of killer dolls. Voiced by character actor Brad Dourif, the pint-sized freak formerly known as Charles Lee Ray slashed his way into our hearts back in 1988. Child's Play arrived way late in the slasher boom, at a time when it could be argued that the subgenre just wasn't that cool anymore. But like any legend, Chucky changed the game. He was as bloodthirsty as Michael Myers, but with Freddy Krueger's sense of humor. He knew how to blindside his victims and get the upper hand, quickly earning his place on the Mount Rushmore of horror icons.
I'm one of the most notorious slashers in history, and I don't want to give that up. I am Chucky, the killer dog!
It's no surprise that Chucky's escapades in Child's Play sparked a film franchise and a TV series. With Child's Play 2, he was given even more of a joking personality, but that didn't detract from the film's scares. Creator Don Mancini had struck gold, and after Child's Play 3, he followed it up with Bride of Chucky, Seed of Chucky, Curse of Chucky, and Cult of Chucky. As outlandish as the films had become, Mancini always poured his heart into the story. After the release of Cult of Chucky in 2017, everybody's favorite plastic plaything went to the Sci-Fi Channel for an ongoing TV series, with an even higher body count and way more mayhem. With the exception of the 2019 remake, the series never missteps its continuity and achieves a masterful consistency. The Evil Dead franchise is like a box of Halloween candy. You never know exactly what you're going to get, but it's probably going to be pretty great. Each installment has its unique set of spooky tricks and treats, presented with wildly different tones and approaches. If you're itching for more straightforward horror, the original 1981 film is a solid choice. If bloody camp is more your speed, there's Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness. But the latter forges deeper into comedic territory, with Ash Williams delivering some of his most iconic zingers.
You found me beautiful once.
Honey, you got real ugly.
If something truly grotesque is what you're seeking, the 2013 remake will shock your system. Telling the story of a young woman undergoing a detox in a secluded cabin, the film pays homage to the original while carving a uniquely terrifying vision. There's also the sequel to the remake, 2023's Evil Dead Rise, which moves the action from the woods to a Los Angeles apartment building. Craving more Ash Williams, as played by the incomparable Bruce Campbell? Check out Ash vs. Evil Dead, a Starz TV series that lasted 3 seasons. Regardless of your appetite, The Evil Dead never shortchanges the audience. Reportedly, 50,000 gallons of fake blood were used in the remake, and Rise doesn't skimp on the gore either. Buckle up, Buttercups, because The Evil Dead is 5 for 5. It only makes sense that the best horror movie franchise is the one all about horror movies. Loosely based on the story of the Gainesville Ripper, the 1996 original flipped the horror genre on its head, with playful meta-commentary and a fang-toothed teardown of genre tropes. That's not all, though. It also introduced Sidney Prescott, the heroine who redefined what it means to be a final girl. Even though he was essential in cementing horror conventions, Wes Craven knew exactly how to shatter them and remold them for a new generation. When Scream became a blockbuster success, sequels were inevitable. Scream 2 and Scream 3 did all the things sequels should do. They upped the body count, delivered more elaborate kill sequences, and put the central characters in mortal danger. The franchise then lay dormant for 11 years, before returning with Scream 4, showcasing Craven's commentary on horror's remake craze. Following his death, the franchise once again laid in wait, this time until 2022. With the requel, Scream, directors Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett veered the story away from Sidney and towards a new crop of characters. Scream 6 followed a year later, and once again delivered the goods with strong character work, more blood, and a brand new setting. Scream is the rare franchise that remains miles ahead of its competition, even on its worst day. You can't kill Ghostface after all.